Hi there, I'm Lillian. Welcome to my channel. Here I help Christian wives heal their femininity so they can stop thinking like sons of God and start embodying their lives like His daughters. I talk about my own journey and how healing my feminine heart led me to the discovery that I was married to a type 3 man. That's the type of man that's a Nabal. If you don't know if you're married to a type 1, 2, or a 3 husband, you can find a link for that in the description box. Do you want to learn how to understand God's Word as a woman, heal yourself by His sanctification, and possibly transform your marriage by faith and knowledge? Then this is the place for you. Well, hello and welcome. In this video, we're going to talk about 6 things a dangerous man hates. Number 1, hearing the word no from a feminine voice. Number 2, any recognition or celebration of your unique gifts and talents. Number 3, when you tell him he's wrong. Number 4, when you see his sheep suit start to slip. Number 5 is being gray rocked. Number 6, your happiness. In the first part of the video, I'm going to lay the groundwork for some marriage basics and for responsibilities and how trials and conflicts are generally resolved in a healthy marriage. Not a perfect one, but a healthy one. Trials and conflicts are a normal part of any marriage. But what I try and draw your attention to on this channel is when normal function has moved from dysfunction to dangerous. In the second part, I'm going to develop each of those things that a dangerous man hates according to that context. So let's dive in. Right off the bat, the thing I want to establish is that being a wolf in sheep's clothing is a choice. If you're married to a wolf in sheep's clothing, he's choosing to identify as a dangerous man. He doesn't have a personality disorder like someone who slips in and out of psychotic breaks with reality. He's not so wounded from childhood that he needs more grace than anyone else because his childhood was so traumatizing. It's not that he has an attachment disorder, so he gets a pass on all relationship obligations in marriage. It's not that he just doesn't know any better because he didn't have a good role model to follow. So his innocent ignorance has now become your burden to endure until one day maybe he figures it out. It's not that he's just wired differently so he can't express love in a way that your feminine heart can feel it. He doesn't have this exceptionally stoic personality trait that means you've got to lower your expectations to the point of normalizing neglect and embracing emotional starvation as just the way that he is. It's not that he misunderstands what real sacrificial love looks like as a provider, and now it's your job to compensate by sacrificing your femininity because he refuses to step into his masculinity. It's none of those things. What it is the truth of how he wants to live his life in this world, and that includes how he relates in marriage. It's not that he doesn't need to heal and change and grow, like all of us do. But why should he change when he has all those great excuses that enable him to keep manipulating and keep controlling and keep taking without ever having to assume full responsibility for himself as a man? In this world, there's only darkness and light. There's no neutral ground that's like some kind of gray purgatory where one kind of species can change into another. Bullfrogs and butterflies? Sure. But sheep and wolves? No. When you're a sheep, you belong to God's kingdom of light. But if you're a wolf, you've made the choice to side with darkness. Matthew 12, verse 30. It was C.S. Lewis that said There is no neutral ground in the universe. Every square inch and every split second is claimed by God and counterclaimed by Satan. What he's talking about is the cosmic war that we're all in. But because it plays out in the unseen realm, we forget where we live. We're not separate from that battle. We exist inside of it. And the battleground doesn't exclude the real estate of marriage. In fact, in the new covenant, that's when it strikes closest to home. Jesus told us that following him would bring division, especially within the most intimate relationships. He said, a person's enemies will be members of their own household. Matthew 10, verse 36. A marriage is the most intimate relationship that there is within a household. This division isn't just about having different beliefs or opinions. It's about the choices each person makes and the effects those choices have on the closest to them. God has given us all free will. Every person, and whether each one of us choose light or darkness, the fundamental mechanisms inside our hearts, minds, and soul, they're the same for everybody. The difference is how each of us make that choice to live in the life that God has given us. He designed the human brain with neuroplasticity. That proves his intentions for us are healing, sanctification, and growth. Romans 1, verses 19 through 21. Neuroplasticity is that free choice. It operates through every thought, every word, and every action. Because there's no neutral ground, every minute of every hour of every day is taking us towards light or darkness. Everybody has that free choice, right? And that means nobody's exempt from the consequences. God puts much more responsibility and weight on those who are in positions of power, whether that's governing authorities or educational authorities, parents, or other siblings. But it's especially weighty when it comes to the responsibility of the leader and the head in marriage. I mean, it was Adam's lack of responsibility that caused the fall. And that right there proves the gravity of leadership and headship when it comes to marriage. Just because a husband might be immature in Christ, that doesn't remove the consequences from the choices he makes in marriage. Being ignorant of how masculinity and femininity work, it doesn't give him a pass either. That's why in 1 Peter 3, verse 7, God holds him alone accountable. He commands husbands to live with their wives in an understanding way. Understanding means learning about her, learning about women, learning about femininity. You can't be a responsible head without understanding what the body is and what she needs. That responsibility isn't just about financial provision or household leadership. It's the whole marriage, the friendship, the emotional connection, and the romantic component of the marriage. The provision for all of it comes from masculinity. If a man refuses to take responsibility, if he withholds his masculinity by refusing to invest in emotional connection and he doesn't cleave to his wife, then he doesn't get to claim any of the benefits of the relationship, including the sexual component. When a husband abdicates his responsibility in one area, he can't then turn around and decide to claim privileges in another. But it's not just the man who's got responsibilities. A wife has responsibilities too. They're nothing like the husband's, but they're just as important. As a wife, your responsibility is to heal, to learn, and to grow in your own femininity so that you become the daughter that God created you to be. That's your sanctification journey, and it's a big enough job all on its own. God has not asked you to heal your husband by taking his sanctification journey for him, and he hasn't asked you to fix the marriage. Your work is your own to do. The work of the marriage belongs to God. 1 Corinthians 3, verses 6 through 9. When there's a lot of conflict in your marriage, it could be that you're married to a wolf, or it could be God pushing you to look at your inner woman. I know that might be hard to hear because it kind of sounds like I'm blaming you, but I'm not. What I'm talking about is taking responsibility for yourself instead of trying to steward your husband's responsibilities. If your femininity's not healed, there's a pretty good chance you're emasculating him. And if he's a broken man, this is incredibly hard for him to come back from. Another thing is that if you're trying to live your marriage through your masculine energy, you are bringing the worst version of yourself to the relationship, and the least prudent version. Being in this state is what blinds you to the truth. A healed feminine heart is the only way to tell the difference between the mistakes that are made by a dysfunctional husband and the intentional actions of a dangerous man. If you stay in a masculine mindset, you won't be able to tell the difference. You'll just keep getting drawn deeper into the war. But when your femininity begins to heal, your identity gets restored and your discernment sharpens. And that means you'll be able to see who he really is. And that's why a dangerous man doesn't want you to heal your feminine heart, because that's what's going to expose him. When you're unhealed, he has you at a disadvantage because you're gullible and naive. That means powerless and weak. But healing takes away powerlessness and gives you back your strength. And that means you're no longer codependent and consumed with pleasing him. And that's why a dangerous man hates these 6 things. The first thing, the number one thing a dangerous man absolutely hates is your feminine no. He hates hearing no from anyone, but especially from a woman and from you, his wife. It's intolerable. But you've got to learn to say no. And I don't mean just an arbitrary no. It's got to be one that aligns with your personality and your individual worth and what you value. A strong feminine no isn't aggressive or defensive. It's firm, it's rooted in God's word, and it's unshakable. Saying no to your husband is an act of self-care that strengthens your femininity. True self-care, which is the primary responsibility of femininity in marriage, it's not about indulgence, it's about ownership. Look at it this way. Every no you say makes space for a more meaningful yes, whether that means refusing to engage in conversations that are toxic, like gossip, slander, or complaining, or limiting exposure to things that will diminish your femininity. Saying no is a clear signal that you're saying yes to guarding your time and your energy. Your personal no's are directly tied to things that God has entrusted you to govern, whether that's your heart, your mind, your time, your body, or your emotions. The best way to begin developing your no is to prepare scripts for yourself in advance. You know where and when you're weak. You know how you get baited. And when you already know how you want to respond, you won't be caught off guard or pressured into any kind of compliance in the moment. My first no happened when I started taking ownership of my responses. I was seeing just how much conflict had always been left open-ended or unresolved between us. I remember constantly feeling confused, often thinking, I don't know how that even got started, but somehow the fault for it always ended up landing on me, even though I didn't even know how it started. I was accused of nagging, not being respectful enough, not being submissive enough, or being too opinionated or too sensitive. It was always something that could be turned around and framed as my fault. But once I saw where the tipping point was, like the point in the conversation where I started to defend myself, that's when I saw that I was being baited into drama. I had always tried to get him to stop baiting me, which is completely ineffective because you don't have control over other people. So instead, I decided to take responsibility for myself and just not take the bait anymore. That was the decision to say no. Those scripts were the stepping stones to the stewardship of my words. The next area where I took ownership was my body. God calls it your temple. 1 Corinthians 3, verses 16 through 17, and 1 Corinthians 6, verses 19 through 20. I had already started a keto lifestyle, but I really struggled to stay consistent. That's when I realized that Dean had been sabotaging me. His only idea of togetherness revolved around food, whether it was watching movies and eating junk food or going out to restaurants. That was the consistent routine of our marriage. So that's where a lot of our conflicts were rooted. There were no deep conversations, no friendship, no meaningful one-flesh relationship, just a ceremony that happened on a certain day and a piece of paper that said we were legally married. In fact, it was whenever I tried to do any of those things, like have a deep conversation or even just a surface general conversation about God, that's when the baiting into drama that I had just talked about, that's when it would start. So when I saw this pattern with the food, at first I hoped that I was wrong, right? No wife wants to believe that about her husband. But when I started to resist it, that's when things became clear. We'd go to Walmart, pick out a movie, and then head to the snack aisle. The first time I said no to junk food, because I had already prepared some keto snacks for myself, he just stared right through me. His jaw muscles clenched and my body instantly went into terror mode. And it was the first time I was actually able to look at it outside of myself and see it. I couldn't identify what it was then. I can now, but I couldn't then. The entire night during both of those movies, he never looked at me once and leaned away from me. The next weekend, I did the opposite. Like I said, hoping to be wrong. I purposely bought the junk food, and suddenly he was super chatty, intentional, and affectionate. It was the only time he ever acted that way towards me, was when I complied by collapsing in on my own convictions. Scripts for this helped me tremendously too. So by observing how your husband responds when you express ownership of yourself is crucial. If you're married to a difficult husband, he's not going to understand what you're doing at first. In fact, he'll probably be confused and a little frustrated, especially if you've spent years trying to get him to change. He's going to think this is just another strategy to fix him. And that's why it's so important that your no isn't about him. It's about you. A healthy but immature or an unhealed husband will eventually adjust into his own healing and growth. That's how masculinity responds to healed femininity. Your self-care teaches him how to love you, and men learn by example. When a man genuinely wants to contribute to you but doesn't know how, it can be hard for him. Actually, probably impossible, but as you heal, you give him options to learn and understand you. 1 Peter 3, verse 7. The more ways he can succeed when he provides for you and invests in you, the more he feels like a man, and that heals him. But a wolf in sheep's clothing is different. He doesn't want you to succeed. He doesn't want you to become who God created you to be. That's because a dangerous man sees his wife as an extension of himself, and not in the interdependent, godly way that Paul talks about in Ephesians 5, where he provides and protects and invests. No, it's not that. It's that he sees you as chattel to possess for his provision. Your heart, mind, soul, and body are owned by him. So when you say no to him, you're stealing what he thinks belongs to him. So even though a difficult man responds with maybe confusion or frustration as you heal, there's one key distinction you should never feel. You should never feel intimidated or feel any rage or or temper tantrums directed at you. Men have aggression. It's part of masculinity, but if a man struggles to take responsibility for his emotions, even in that struggle, your femininity will never be the landing spot for his unrestrained anger. A healthy man knows, even a dysfunctional man, he knows you're the weaker vessel, and that a deposit of his anger into you will shatter a part of you. So even though there might be some anger, it will never be directed at you. I missed that key distinction for so long. Years later, when I finally reached out to the church for help, he agreed to meet with the pastor, and suddenly, this was the moment he miraculously got saved, except he didn't. Nothing changed. Things were different. His anger didn't disappear through sanctification, though. It went underground. It was still there. It was just hidden and expressed differently. Instead of being openly aggressive whenever I didn't say or do what he wanted, he became covert. At the time, I hadn't started healing yet, so I couldn't see it, but looking back, oh my stars, I can see the pattern so clearly. Evil does not heal. It changes into a different disguise so that it looks different. It goes away for a little while so that it can strategize. Luke 4, verse 13. When you desperately want a better marriage, your naivety tricks you into thinking that different is a change for the better. The difference between a dysfunctional husband who needs healing, or maybe just to grow up, and a wolf in sheep's clothing is that a wolf is on the dark triad. His personality traits are narcissism, psychopathy, and sadism. A wolf has all three traits, but in different combinations and levels. In Dean's case, the dominant traits that I experienced were mostly narcissism and sadism, with psychopathy being the third, but they were all present. That's important to remember. The levels of each trait depend on you. A wolf will change to whatever tactic works best at the time. That's Machiavellianism. It's the mechanism that operates the strategy behind all three traits. That's why as you heal, the wolf is forced to adapt so that he keeps the truth about himself hidden. He hates that because he just wants you to play the part that he chose for you. As I became stronger in my femininity, more sure of my identity as God's daughter, Dean's tactics shifted. His overt narcissism became more covert through Machiavellianism, more scheming and more cunning. If you're married to a wolf, you have to be prepared for that shift. As you heal, he'll change, not just to keep control, but also to increase his cover. If your husband is simply broken or a dysfunctional man, things may get dodgy and frustrating for a time or even a season. There might be anger, confusion, or resistance, but you won't experience him getting sneakier. But with a wolf, the stronger you get and the more integrated you become, you'll see more covert abuse. If you start to chart your marriage on the Duluth wheel of power and control, you'll likely find yourself represented in nearly every section. When it came to trying to resolve conflicts, it didn't matter how respectful I was. It didn't matter how perfectly I framed my no in I statements to take responsibility, which is something every communication expert has probably told you to do in marriage. It will never work with a wolf. No matter how kind or gentle your explanation is, no matter how much you assure him that your choice is about your personal healing and growth and not about him, a wolf will always label you as disobedient or unsubmissive or disrespectful or selfish, etc., etc. Why? Because whenever you have any of your own opinions or thoughts or likes and dislikes, a wolf sees that as an attack on him. Why does he see it that way? Because to him, the fact that you married him is proof to him that your identity isn't yours to steward. And the more competent you become, the more integrated your identity becomes, the harder a dangerous man is going to come against you. You'll experience more emotional whiplashing. That means there'll be stronger cycles of love bombing and then withdrawal and disconnection. This is the oscillation that you live in between bonding and rejection. Bonding and rejection. It will become extreme. He wants you bouncing back and forth because your integration means he's losing control. And make no mistake, if your husband is a dangerous man, he thrives on the control he has of you. The stewardship of your feminine autonomy through the word no is a constant reminder that he does not own you. God does. The second thing a dangerous man hates are any gifts, skills, or special talents that you have, because he cannot stand for anyone, especially you, to be recognized or celebrated. He won't be happy for anyone else, especially you, because your light, the light that shines from your talents, it draws people to look at you, to see you and notice you. And to him, that's a problem. It threatens him. In his mind, if people are looking at you, it means they are ignoring him. I was blessed. The Lord always surrounded me with people who uplifted me. I wouldn't say I had a ton of friends, but I never had trouble making real connections. Friendship where there was a natural give and take, where we encouraged and built each other up. I've shared before how much I love cooking and that I'm good at it, not in the sense of inventing brand new dishes, but in taking something familiar and transforming it into something completely different. That's a gift from God. But Dean, he didn't want that gift shared. He didn't want people to see it, to acknowledge it, or to celebrate me in it. He only wanted that gift funneled toward him for his benefit. If it didn't serve him, if he couldn't somehow link it back to himself, then in his eyes, it was either a waste of money or a waste of time or just useless. I had a lot of dreams that ended up, over the course of 30 years, that ended up falling into one of those categories. When I was homeschooling my kids, I wanted to get my teaching degree and open up a daycare. A few years later, I wanted to go to culinary school and start a catering business. Then I wanted to study design and sewing. I wanted to learn piano, maybe even teach it. I wanted to learn photography and sell my work. Every single one of those dreams were tied to the skills and talents that God had given to me, to develop for me, to use for others, and to multiply his kingdom. But they never happened. When you're married to a dangerous man, it's not that you just wake up one day and decide to bury your gifts and talents. No, it happens slowly over years. He conditions you to believe that your gifts don't matter unless they serve him. Dean chipped away at mine little bit by little bit until I was no longer the servant entrusted with much. Instead, you become the one who buries what God gave her. And by the time you realize it, there's nothing left inside of you but an echo of the skills and talents that you used to have. These weren't just interests or passing ideas that came and went. They were deposits from the Lord that he meant to build into each other, not replace one another. My desire to teach has never faded. It's always there. He wove it into the fabric of who I am. So as my kids grew older and they became more independent in their education, I finally had some space to explore new things. And that's when the pull toward culinary school and catering started to surface. It wasn't a shift away from teaching. It was another layer of who I was meant to be. And it wasn't just an idea in my head. Others saw it in me too. A friend of mine who ran a painting business with her husband heard me mention catering once. And right then, she asked me to cater their next annual financial meeting. Just like that. She was on board, believing something I hadn't even really realized in myself yet. And it wasn't the first time. I was regularly asked to cook and help organize and structure functions and events at church because people recognized something in me that I wasn't allowing myself to fully embrace. And even with all that, I still never believed my talent could be expanded outside the home, at a professional level. One of my daughters told me years later that she remembers how much effort I put into recreating the Tim Hortons chili for him because he loved it so much, and that I nailed it. But after making it only a couple of more times, he started complaining, accusing me of intentionally changing the recipe, and it didn't taste the same, so he didn't want me to make it anymore. That's how diminishment and gaslighting happen. Those two work together so that you don't just second guess yourself, but also your own reality. I actually believed that I maybe did change it somehow by not being as careful in measuring, or maybe I bought a different brand of spice that I hadn't previously used. It was never about the food. It was about undermining my competence in that skill. Because as soon as my talents or skills became visible to other people, whenever someone else wanted to celebrate them, he hated it. It wasn't just about crushing them from the outside world. He didn't even want our kids to see them. He knew that my relationship with them had been built through all the years of homeschooling. And even more important was that I was their primary educator in faith. So he tried to sabotage that too. After his deceptively fake conversion, he told my daughters that because he was saved now, they didn't need to ask me any more questions about God, that they could ask him. That wasn't about faith, it was about control. It's impossible for a dangerous man to authentically celebrate his wife's gifts, skills, or talents. He doesn't invest in them, he doesn't support them, and he doesn't encourage them. He only consumes them because he believes they belong to him, not you. The third thing a dangerous man hates is when you tell him he's wrong. When you decide to stop doing activities that you can now see aren't beneficial or uplifting or righteous, what you're doing is telling him he's wrong. We all have opinions that are different, and usually in an argument or disagreement, there's room to say, we'll have to agree to disagree. At least in healthy relationships, there's that space. But in an argument with a dangerous man, that agreeing to disagree, it's never going to happen. To a healthy husband, a difference of opinion is just that, a difference. But when it comes to a dangerous man, disagreeing with him is the same as telling him he's inferior. And if you ever prove that he's wrong, if you're able to demonstrate it with undeniable evidence, that's not just unacceptable to him. It's dangerous for you, because it's not that he just has a big ego. It's sacred to him. A big ego and misogyny aren't the same thing. I've said this before. All wolves in sheep's clothing are misogynists. Misogyny hides itself inside of an inflated ego. A big ego is synonymous with a large presence of testosterone that all men have. A big ego, that's what healthy masculinity is. And it's good for femininity when it's demonstrated through provision and contribution. Misogyny is toxic to femininity because he doesn't have the goods to back up his bravado. So he has to do the opposite of contribution by pushing down on her so she's made smaller. You won't be able to pinpoint exactly what's happening or why or how, especially if you're unhealed. You'll just feel it. This is because a dangerous man doesn't just think he's right. He believes he's incapable of being wrong. Why does he think that? Because he fancies himself a god, omnipotent, all-knowing, and all-powerful. Christian marriage sets up this invisible pattern between the husband and wife whenever they talk about a marriage triangle. On one hand, they say a marriage triangle, but what they really mean is the structure of hierarchy. Every marriage book about relationship that I used to read used the image of a triangle in an ethereal way. But when it came to fleshing out marriage in the real world, it always came through the structure. That hierarchical structure reinforces the idea that being created as a male, God has endowed him as automatically wiser than you, more capable than you, and more important than you. He isn't amazing because of his character or his ability to provide love or his actions. He's simply amazing because he's a man. And you, a female, are nothing special and totally replaceable. This is how misogyny works. A dangerous man isn't just egotistical. He's deeply offended by your feminine existence, but only with you. He doesn't act this way with other women or men. With them, he just comes off as maybe an arrogant jerk. But with you, after the wedding, you are now his personal subject. You're the only one he can't allow to think independently or challenge his authority. In your marriage, every conversation, every decision, every interaction has been engineered by him so that you stay in a state of codependence on him. That means you spend a lot of time being confused and disoriented and frustrated, completely convinced that all the problems and conflicts are because of you. He'll do anything to make sure you never have the courage or the clarity to hold a kind of view of him that's different than the one he has of himself. Because to him, your entire existence is supposed to be an extension of his own. By healing, you organically replace codependency with interdependence. And that means you reclaim what was never his in the first place. By becoming integrated in your stewardship, Proverbs 25, verse 28, and competent in guarding your own heart, Proverbs 4, verse 23, that sends him off the rails. Number 4 and 5 go together, but I'm going to talk about them separately because even though there's lots of overlap, they are two different things. Number 4 is that wolves hate it when you start to see their sheep suit slip. A dangerous man hates the moment when you begin to see him for what he really is. When you make the connection of those first two dots, when you start to finally realize he's not just a dysfunctional or broken man who struggles to understand femininity and how to be in a relationship, the moment when you stop falling for his deception and realize just how deeply you've been manipulated, that sheep suit, his persona or mask, whatever you want to call it, he's been carefully crafting that. It was never random. Willy-nilly, just let me pick all these good shiny traits to disguise the evil that I am. It was designed especially to match you. It fit perfectly into the unhealed places inside your heart, every broken and wounded area. That's why, in the beginning, he felt like a perfect match. In fact, those very areas where he once hooked into you are now repellent to both of you. Your healing doesn't just make him repellent to you in those areas, it makes you repellent to him. And that's why a dangerous man will eventually leave. 1 Corinthians 7, verse 15. You're no longer a match. Well, it's not that you're no longer a match. You were never equally yoked to begin with. It's just that it's obvious now because you can see it. Okay, now, here's the confusing part that always gets us into trouble. We fall for the psychological trap that tells us dangerous men are just wounded or broken and locked in some kind of internal struggle against themselves. That's secular ideology talking, not truth. Colossians 2, verse 8. They're not fighting to escape their own trauma. They are wolves. They don't have trauma. They're fighting so that they don't lose supply, which is you. When you start seeing through their disguise, it does increase their fighting with you. But it's not because they're running from reality. It's because they feed on the expression of all your negative emotions. I want to define a couple of terms here. When I say feed on, I'm talking about the relational exchanges we experience with each other. What a person gives or receives in an interaction with another person. Every exchange carries energy, and that energy comes from our emotions, whether those emotions are positive or negative. A healthy man, not a perfect one, but a healthy one, he receives and responds to both positive and negative emotions in a balanced way. A wolf in sheep's clothing, he can't feed off the energy found in your positive emotions. He has no use for joy, peace, unity, or love. If this was as simple and straightforward as just feeding off all emotions because they're broken and traumatized, like the world wants to diagnose them, then they would feed off of all your emotions, including your joy and happiness and pleasure. But they don't do that, do they? They only feed on your misery. If you look at your feelings wheel, all the emotions you're capable of experiencing, and ask yourself, which emotions seem to surface most often in your interactions with your husband? Which ones seem to get the strongest reactions from your body? It's always the negative ones, because he's got to crush the good that you are. Proverbs 18, verse 22. A wolf is not interested in the Lord's favor that comes through you. Instead, he wants to destroy every good thing you bring to the relationship, your gifts, your skills, and your talents, and any feminine expression of joy, peace, happiness, and pleasure, he's got to find a way to destroy all of it. But as you heal, he starts to lose this fight. That's why it looks like the sheep suit is slipping. It's not because he's getting tired of keeping up the act or he's getting sloppy. It's you, sister. As you become whole, you start seeing the truth. Your lack of naivety pushes slivers or like flashes of reality into your consciousness. Your shrewdness starts to replace gullibility, and it sharpens your discernment. You see clearly now because the obstacles of naivety and gullibility that were blocking your vision, they're disappearing. The fifth thing a dangerous man hates, and this one is tied to number 4, because once you see through his sheep suit, once you experience that moment of awakening, he knows he's going to lose you as supply. This is called gray rocking. A wolf hates being gray rocked for 2 reasons. First, he loses access to those negative emotions he feeds on. Wolves don't have emotions like ours, so they want to have lots of drama around them. Drama is how they get access to those emotions. Second, he loses the prop that kept his mask in place, which is you. You were never supposed to see that the sheep suit was just a suit, a cover, a facade. Now, in terms of femininity and healing, I don't accept the traditional definition of gray rock. I did get the results, but it wasn't intentional. For me, gray rocking wasn't some strategy I decided to use. It was something that happened organically because of healing my femininity. As my identity in God became more and more integrated, sanctification was strengthening me. I stopped feeding into the toxic dynamic that had kept my marriage working for so many years. But I didn't realize that I was causing that kind of paradigm shift. See, for 34 years, I was brokenhearted, unhealed, and gullible, a naive people pleaser. And in that state, the marriage worked. And when I say worked, I don't mean it was healthy. I mean he was able to manipulate my emotions for his supply. The marriage kept working for him meant that basically he was trying to keep the dynamic the same while I was trying to change it. But when I began healing, I became more competent, more whole. I stopped looking for validation from him, so the codependent dynamic had no choice but to disintegrate. A wolf cannot function in an interdependent marriage. It has to be one of dominance and submission, which is codependency. Women who have healed and have reclaimed their identity as daughters of God don't need to consciously gray rock. It's not something you do. It's the result that happens when you govern yourself. Proverbs 25, verse 28. The more I healed, the more competent I became. That meant I took more and more responsibility for how I stewarded my whole temple, my heart, my mind, my soul, and my body. The less I relied on input from a disconnected, controlling, and neglectful husband. Without me allowing myself to be used as supply for the drama, the marriage could no longer sustain itself. All relationships, whether it's toxic or healthy, it needs an energy exchange. When you heal, you naturally stop feeding the toxic cycle, and when that happens, the wolf will either escalate or move on to find someone else who will engage with his drama. The sixth thing a dangerous man hates is your joy and happiness. Not just the joy that comes from deep inside you, but all of it. Anything from a simple smile or the tiniest spark of pleasure to a full-on expression like an outburst of joy. He hates it because all of it it all blesses God. Joy is spiritual warfare. It's the antithesis of the misery he feeds on when he's able to create that negative drama between the two of you. Your joy is living proof that he's losing his hold on you. God says he'll bring beauty from ashes, but what are ashes? They aren't just things that happen around you or that life does to you. A lot of people only see ashes as a loss of something or someone. Ashes are also any kind of destruction that happens to you, not just now in adulthood, but since birth. Beauty is the healing of those fractures in your soul, all those bits, those feminine bits that were once broken down and without walls because they weren't protected and you weren't taught how to protect them. And what have we already established? A dangerous man matches his abuse to your brokenness. And that means every unhealed wound, every missing piece inside of you was something he was able to latch onto, something he could use to manipulate and control, things he could use to bait you into fights and get you to second guess yourself. All that ash was how he kept you enmeshed in a toxic energy exchange. But when you heal, God restores those disconnected pieces. So those wounds that match between his manipulation and your brokenness, they all disappear. And that means he's losing access to you. You don't have any more easy buttons to press. There's no more predictable reactions for him to try and provoke in you. He can't twist your emotions into frustration anymore. And that's why joy, the kind of joy that comes from authentic wholeness, is so threatening to him. It proves that where there was once naive gullibility inside you, there's now shrewdness and stewardship. It proves that where there was once fear, there's now faith and trust in God. The ashes of an unput together heart and soul become beautiful when God himself heals and integrates you. Isaiah 61 verses 1 through 3 and Matthew 12 verses 15 through 21. This, my sister, this is the unfading beauty of God that he talks about in 1 Peter 3 verse 4. Not an external beauty, but an inner beauty. It's one that can't be destroyed or stolen, and it can't be dominated by manipulation. A dangerous man hates that kind of beauty because it's light, and it's light that conquers darkness. You know, until I started to heal, I didn't understand what God meant when he talked about this inner beauty. And for so many of us, this verse has been distorted by the English words and the masculine interpretation. It's been taught to us in a way that strips the feminine creature of her true power, and so we've been completely confused about what it really means to have a gentle and quiet spirit. The Greek word praus is always translated as gentle or meek, but when we hear those words applied to a wife, the masculine interpretation intends for them to mean powerlessness. So what happens when a wife is faced with a husband who's sinning against her? She's left with little to no personal agency. It's like a woman with a quiet and gentle spirit is supposed to be passive and weak and tolerant of sin and silent about it. She's supposed to be nice to a man who does evil towards her because she's married to him. But here's the problem. That's not what praus actually means. When it comes to sin, Jesus himself is described as praus. And what did he do when he was confronted with sin? He went into the temple and demonstrated his masculine power and agency all over the place to drive out corruption. He stood firm in the truth that he knew. So if praus really means power, and Jesus showed us what his righteous power from God looks like, then the traditional interpretation of praus as powerless and submissively weak doesn't add up. No wonder so many of us have been messed up, confused, and blinded by this verse. The English words meek and gentle don't even come close to capturing the true meaning of praus in the context of femininity. Praus means genuine and unpretentious. It means you are the real deal of who God created you to be, not fake. The power of femininity in marriage is supposed to be conspicuous, not inconspicuous. For a woman, this means she embodies her personal agency, like Jesus did, empowered in her authentic femininity, standing firm in the identity that God chose for her when he created her. Now let's look at the second Greek word, hesios. The traditional masculine interpretation gives us the impression that a quiet spirit means not talking, or not talking too much, or talking in the right way. But hesios doesn't have anything to do with speech, or words for that matter. It's about mental and emotional calmness. It means that you're emotionally undisturbed and mentally composed. You're steady, self-possessed, deliberate, calm, and unshakable. And here's the key. Both of these words have nothing to do with a man or marriage. They have everything to do with your feminine heart in relationship with God and trusting him. At the heart of everything we've talked about in this video, there's one question I want you to consider. How does this reveal the difference between a true believing husband and a wolf who's disguising himself as a believing husband? It comes down to this. A husband contributes to you for the purpose of expanding your femininity, but a wolf wants to cripple you because of your femininity. A dangerous man isn't just trying to break the marriage. A broken marriage is merely the fallout of something much deeper and sinister. His true goal is to strip you of your identity as God's daughter, to consume and destroy everything in you that radiates feminine joy, strength, and light. A true husband, he's not going to be perfect, but his intentions show up in the patterns of his outcomes. His love nurtures your heart. His leadership uplifts your soul, and his presence brings peace, both emotionally and mentally. A wolf, he says one thing and then ends up doing another consistently. His words will sound convincing because he's telling you exactly what you want to hear. But look at the patterns you see. What's the condition of your marriage? What's the condition of you and your relationship with God? Because the male is the stronger vessel in the marriage. It's his intentions that prevail. Proverbs 23, verse 7. That's how you see the truth, not in what he says or in what he does, but in what his presence has created. Thank you for sticking around all the way to the end. I appreciate your time. If I've said something that hit home for you, or if you've got a story or a thought that might help another sister out, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. We're living in a time where we can't afford to keep reading scripture through just the masculine lens. God's word speaks to the feminine heart too. And when we begin to hear it in the fullness of who He created us to be, everything starts to come into focus. Bye for now, and I'll see you in the next one.